Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SA Grain Industry Blueprint Update webinar. That's a bit of a mouthful. My name is Rowan Thomas. I'm the Policy and Communications Manager at Grain Producers SA. And online we have John Gladigo, the Chair of Grain Producers SA, and Neil Howells, who is from Hudson Howells, who's the consultant that's been assisting GPSA with updating the SA Grain Industry Blueprint, and we also have Brendan from GPSA doing the back end of this webinar. So thanks to everyone for tuning in and taking time out of your busy day to attend this important update to what's an important document for the SA grain industry. Now, just a few housekeeping items before we get underway. Now, this webinar will run for around 60 minutes, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. But it does include a Q&A session at the end where you have the opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Just a reminder that this webinar is also being recorded and we will be uploading it to GPSA's YouTube channel most likely later on today. And so you'll have the opportunity to watch back if you are unable to stay for the full 60 minutes, or if someone that you know hasn't been able to attend and would like to look at it later and also provide their feedback. So the feedback on the blueprint will be taking for the next week to 2 weeks. So if you do have any feedback on the presentation, on the draft blueprint, and on where we have gotten to with the blueprint, then feel free to send those thoughts and submissions to info@grainproducersa.com.au. And obviously, questions can be asked via the Q&A box, and I'll collate those and ask them of either Neil, John, or myself at the end of the presentation. Now, to get underway, I'd like to introduce John Gladigo, GPSA Chair, to say a few words and give a brief background on the SA Grains Industry Blueprint when it was originally developed and launched, and why GPSA is updating it now. And he'll then hand over to Neil from Hudson Howells to take us through his presentation and progress to date on the updated blueprint. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Rowan. Appreciate that, and welcome on behalf of GPSA, as Rowan said, to all of those who are joining us today on the webinar, but also to those that are watching it on the recording as well. We also really want to thank all of those who have contributed to this review in any way, and that includes growers, researchers, exporters, and supply chain partners as well, in the dozens of interviews and discussions that Neil has done over the past few months. We also want to acknowledge the South Australian government through PIRSA for the contribution that they have made to making financial contributions to making this review happen. Grain Producers South Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we work on, that we're listening from and we're presenting from for today's webinar. A little bit of background, I guess, to the blueprint. It was launched back in 2020. Basically, it was about establishing our grain industry's vision for the decade through to 2030. And at that point, we set ourselves what we thought at the time was quite an ambitious growth target of $6 billion by 2030. Which we actually ended up surpassing in the period between 2022 and 24, which obviously were really big grain producing years, and obviously that's come back quite a bit now in the current drought environment. But the reality is we really are in a very rapidly changing industry, and as a result we are constantly re-evaluating and reimagining, I guess, what a future prosperous industry looks like here in South Australia. So the purpose of this update is to set a new growth target and update the initiatives and the growth indicators along the way. And it's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's really about repositioning ourselves with new information, evaluating what's worked, maybe what hasn't worked so well, things that we can build on in time, and what we can look to change as we move forward in our industry. As I mentioned before, the update has been supported through funding from PIRSA through the state government, which we're greatly appreciative of and their support. Last year, GPSA appointed Neil Howells from Hudson Howells to work on the blueprint update, and he has certainly interviewed a lot of people over the last couple of months and got some fantastic information that he has put together. As part of that, he also had discussions and interviewed members of the GPSA's Young Grain Producer Committee. And last week we had a presentation and discussion with the GPSA board, with the board members also having input, obviously, as farmers as well. So without any further ado, I'm just going to hand across to Neil, and who'll walk us through the process. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks very much, Rowan. And I'll just share the screen. Great. So, as John mentioned, the objectives of the project, which commenced late last year, refreshed the blueprint to reflect a series of evolving challenges and grower priorities that have occurred since the current blueprint was adopted. Build on the success. Again, as John mentioned, the $6 billion revenue target was achieved early, and certainly to equip GPSA to lead, influence, and track sector-wide progress. What I'm about to show you is a practical grower-driven roadmap to 2035. So the original blueprint target was exceeded, and it was also in that pre-COVID period, and certainly as a result of challenges and opportunities that have occurred since then, it was clear that an update was required. So this is very much a refresh. As John said, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And over that time, and it became very clear through the consultation process, industry has certainly evolved, digital adoption, sustainability, workforce needs, and market access being key features or themes that emerged during the consultation process. Again, it was recognised by GPSA that the original structure was somewhat challenging to navigate. There were a whole heap of priorities and targets, and there was definitely an opportunity to consolidate, which is where we've got to. So a clearer, more concise format was certainly needed for stakeholder engagement and implementation. And our new blueprint, the blueprint you're about to see, sets a revised vision to 2035 based on current growth, risk and opportunities, and also the trends that emerged through the consultation process. So the approach, to begin with, we undertook a comprehensive review and analysis of the 2020 blueprint, and we used that analysis to inform the approach that we undertook with, as it turned out, 25 in-depth interviews with 31 participants, and I'll run through those in just a minute. The process was quite rigorous. I contacted all of the prospective participants, asked them whether they'd be interested in undertaking an interview with me, sent them a background paper, a copy of the interview guide, and then conducted the interviews, which ran from I think the shortest was about 45 minutes through to 2 hours, I think was the longest one. And we covered all of the value chain, from the universities involved right at the very embryonic phase of research, the plant breeders, the growers, of course, those involved in trading, export, policy, R&D, and quite importantly, on the digital ag front. We also ran an online survey, and we found that validated the themes that came through from the interviews. We only had 8 responses to that, but I think we only invited about 15 people to participate, and largely they were people that, for whatever reason, weren't able to make time to be interviewed. All of the interviews, as John mentioned, were undertaken by myself. I interviewed John as well. That was all undertaken with great support from GPSA and PIRSA. So the interviewees, as I mentioned, included the full spectrum of those organisations and people involved in the sector. It was balanced across regions and functions, and included contributors from New South Wales, WA, and Queensland. And the survey reinforced the following industry priorities: workforce and succession coming out very, very strongly, innovation and adoption, infrastructure, or in some cases the lack of it, and market access, and practical sustainability frameworks. And I'll come back to that one a little bit later as well. So who did we speak to? As John mentioned, I spoke to the young grain producers. I also spoke with the board, so there was quite a lengthy discussion with the board in relation to this. And then a range of people, a pretty broad range of people that you can see here, from growers and consultants to grain handlers and those involved in trade and market access. Grain handlers, including Grains Australia, Food SA, Cooper's Brewery, so pretty broad spectrum of people there. And then from the industry strategy, policy and advocacy side, Grain Growers Limited, Grain Producers Australia, Primary Producers SA, Elders, and PIRSA, of course. And then on the R&D side, there were the interview with SARDI was a group interview, so all of the representatives that you can see there from SARDI attended the one meeting. And then on the digital ag and precision ag side, representatives from SPA and AgWorld. So it was pretty much a 360-degree picture of who is involved in the sector. So all of the interviews were written up by me. They were sent back to the people I interviewed, and they were given an opportunity to review those and correct anything that I might have misinterpreted, or add anything that they might have thought of following the interview. The written up interviews were then analysed, and a series of themes emerged, with cost pressures and inflation being top concerns in the impact that has on margin. Certainly succession and workforce development being critical, and this is right across the value chain, from the research side through to the growers and the traders. Mental health and well-being really came through strongly in just about every interview that I undertook. This is an area that's been highlighted in the refreshed blueprint. The shift towards lentils and soil amelioration, reshaping farming systems, also emerged as a consistent theme. On the trade and market access side, there are issues that you would be familiar with in terms of containers out of Adelaide, but and also the geopolitical concerns about market access going forward into the future, infrastructure bottlenecks, varietal alignment, so making sure that we've actually got varieties that markets are after, and the need to maintain social license and the associated traceability credentials. The third theme, policy and advocacy. A key issue is that sustainability must be practical and regionally relevant. So there was a view that a lot of the requirements around sustainability are difficult and challenging to manage at the farm level. So there's this disconnect between the policy settings and the on-farm realities. What also came through really strongly through the interview process was the importance of GPSA's role as a trusted evidence-based advocate, and the ongoing role that GPSA will have as the custodian of the blueprint going forward, and a requirement for the simplification and co-design for ESG compliance. R&D and innovation. So there's strong demand for grower-led applied research, some frustration with a slow translation from research to adoption, and innovation, not just for innovation's sake, but to improve the profitability and operational efficiency of farms. And certainly support for regional pilot zones and cross-sector partnerships. I'll come back to that a bit more when we get to the vision. And finally, digital ag and workforce. So there is a very strong concern with the connectivity gap being a barrier to the uptake of digital tools, and the tools that are needed to integrate compliance, logistics, and workforce management. Labour attraction and succession planning are critical enablers, and this is right across the board, as I mentioned, and it includes barriers to adoption of technology where it can become very difficult to attract the people who can service the technology that farmers might acquire at a regional level. Strong support for practical, scalable digital innovation. PIRSA undertook quite extensive modelling and based on 3 growth scenarios, being average growth output of 1.7% going forward, 3% being a longer term output growth minus potential rainfall decline, and 4.5% recent strong growth output. And that brought us to a projected farm gate value in 2035 of 3.8 billion on the low growth scenario, 4.3 on the average growth scenario, and 5 on the high growth scenario. This translates to an indicative gross food revenue value of 6.2 to 8.2 billion. And as part of the project, we are in the process of developing a dashboard which can track indicators going forward, innovation, market access, workforce, and sustainability. And we'll have a look at those in just a minute. So the revised strategic framework from 2025 over the next 10 years to 2035, and I'll cover this in more detail in just a minute, but overall we've got a new vision, some enabling principles, and 3 strategic pillars down from the 6 strategic pillars that we had in the 2020 blueprint. So the vision for 2035, this has been based on the feedback and analysis of the interviews and the survey that we undertook, and also feedback from the meeting with the young grain producers and the board. By 2035, South Australia will be recognised as a leading state in the production and value adding of grain and grain-based products, where growers, researchers, manufacturers and supply chain partners work together to deliver trusted, sustainable and high-performing grain systems and products. What came through really clearly is the competitive advantage that South Australia has in terms of its ability to collaborate and be nimble because of its size. So building on this to deliver this vision by 2035 will certainly enhance South Australia's competitive advantage as a trusted and reliable grain producer. We also, through this process, and again in consultation with GPSA, developed a set of enabling principles. And these are the foundational values and approaches that underpin the entire blueprint. So they don't replace the strategic pillars, but they guide GPSA on how it will work across the 3 pillars that we've landed on. As you'll be well aware, the key role of GPSA is to advocate and develop policy, and as a leader in the sector. So through this leadership, advocacy and collaboration, GPSA will, as it has done, focus on grower-driven policy influence, building stronger strategic partnerships across research, government and industry, continue to be the trusted sector voice and public engagement vehicle, and coordinate delivery through its facilitation and oversight. So the blueprint pillars that we had in 2020, we had 6 of them: market opportunities, capturing value, biosecurity and market access, innovation, building industry capacity and infrastructure. And they've been consolidated into the 3 pillars plus the enabling principles, being trusted markets and market alignment, secure and sustainable production systems, and innovation, adoption and adaptability. And having a look at each one of these, the first pillar, secure and sustainable production systems, whole farm resilience and climate adaptation, sustainable agronomy, emissions reduction and biodiversity, system-wide biosecurity and risk management, and workforce development and leadership succession, with the outcome being reliable production, measurable environmental gains, and a skilled, secured workforce. The second pillar, trusted markets and market alignment, verify traceability and stewardship credentials, varietal and product alignment with key markets, real-time market intelligence to guide production, and stronger branding and infrastructure advocacy, with the outcome being premium pricing, expanded access, and stronger supply chain competitiveness. And our third pillar, innovation, adoption and adaptability, with grower-led innovation co-design, ag-tech, precision farming and digital tools, RD&E alignment to value-added product development, and cross-sector innovation partnerships, with the outcome being faster technology adoption, collaborative innovation and increased productivity. So we're partnering with Hughes PR to undertake all the graphic design component of the revised blueprint. So that's the board endorsed cover for the new blueprint. And as I mentioned, we're also in the process of developing an online dashboard which will track the blueprint's progress. This will measure sector progress on a series of indicators over time and be accessible 24/7 via the GPSA website for transparency and review. So I'll just flip across to the dashboard. Hopefully you can all see that. And this is an interactive dashboard, and it's split into 3 sections. So we've got a headline forecast, bearing in mind that this is all the data that is in here at the moment is dummy data. So this is a work in progress. So we've got the headline forecast, the crop production trends, which will be based on the data provided by PIRSA. And then section 3 will address each of the strategic pillars. Going back to here. So the next steps, the industry webinar, which we're holding today. And following this, we'll be finalising the blueprint, confirming the revised pillars, the themes and the language, the design and build, the final graphic design work and dashboard integration, and then a launch in the 3rd quarter of this year. So that brings us to an updated blueprint that's been shaped by the industry. It's evidence-led and very much delivery focused and ready to guide GPSA in the sector through to 2035.
Great. Thanks very much, Neil. Appreciate it. Now we'll just get back to presentation. Right. Well, thanks very much for that, Neil. Really appreciate it. And just to sort of recap and to remind people, so everything that you've seen in the sort of the consultation process and the blueprint changes that we're proposing today, those are all draft, and we're sort of working through that process at the moment. Grain producers can provide their feedback to GPSA on the proposed changes over the next fortnight, and what you see in this presentation very likely will be somewhat changed between now and the final blueprint as we go through the final stages of refining the blueprint and getting the final list of priorities and indicators set down. So we've got a few questions that have come through. So I might ask the question and then Neil or John can jump in and answer. So the first one that we've received is, so who is responsible for making sure this blueprint gets delivered? Because there's a bit of a criticism on the past blueprint that there wasn't a lot of oversight on delivery. John, do you want to go with that one?
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of GPSA to have that oversight, and it's up to us to be continuing that monitoring and to be working together with growers, but also with industry to make that happen. I think the good thing about what we're doing here now is that I think it is much more transparent. We have a dashboard. It's live. It's not that there's just a whole random series of ideas that have been put out there for people to choose from. It's more about actually having a vision that the whole of industry can align with. And so for us as as GPSA, we certainly are looking at are ensuring that our strategic plan as GPSA does align with those pillars. And those overarching principles, which Neil was talking about as well, becomes the responsibility of GPSA to ensure that we bring that into the mix as well. Of course, when we're working together with groups such as Saget and other researchers and right across the whole supply chain, that we will be pointing them and having oversight on how we can actually link everything back to this. But also, I said the thing is having it. It's the responsibility of GPSA also to ensure that it's that we are keeping it live, keeping it current, and pointing to it at all times. Neil, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it, John, but GPSA clearly has a leadership role, and through the consultation process, it's really clear that the current blueprint, the 2020 blueprint, has been used pretty widely by a variety of organisations, from researchers using it to guide their research applications, GRDC in terms of what they might be funding, and other peer bodies having a look at the blueprint to understand exactly what's happening in the sector. So I think that that collaborative approach that GPSA has in its leadership role will continue to extend, and I think this more simplified and transparent version of the blueprint will be a real boost to the sector, and as you mentioned, right across the supply chain, to understand where the sector's headed, and the collaboration that needs to take place in order to achieve that. It's not just one entity that's running with this, but it's going to be the collaborative efforts of all of the partners to deliver on it.
And Neil, can I just I'll put a question back to you, a rhetorical question, as such. So if we got growers sitting out there that are listening to this webinar today,
yeah,
and they're saying, "What is this blueprint all about?" In your mind, how would you see that growers themselves would look to this and engage with it going forward?
Yeah, I think through the consultation process, one of the challenges I think for growers is to really understand where the sector's headed and where the investment that they should be making in their farms is best directed. So having, I think, a clear vision going forward to 2035, and also I think it will help. John, you're a farmer. It can be a lonely existence out on the farm, and understanding where the overall sector's headed and the role that you're playing in it, I think, can be quite reassuring in terms of those investment decisions, but also those organisations that farmers partner with, the agronomists who can be using this the blueprint as well to guide what they're doing, right from the researchers and the plant breeders and everybody else involved in that supply chain. So yeah, really valuable.
Yep. And can I just also reiterate that as part of the blueprint process, GPSA does annual surveys, which we take priorities from growers of the things that are important to them, that they want GPSA to focus on, but what they want industry to focus on as well, and they certainly form an important part of this blueprint, and have been integrated into, I guess, those priority pillars, haven't they, Neil?
Yes, they have. Yeah.
Excellent. This question, you've both kind of covered off on it, but it sort of goes back to first principles. But why is it important that we have a blueprint at all for the grain sector, and why is it important that we're updating it now?
Do you want me to handle that one, John? Or
Yeah, go Neil. Yep.
Okay.
I'll jump in.
The 2020 blueprint, there was certainly through the consultation process, it was recognised by the board and GPSA executive that there was a lot in the 2020 blueprint. It was somewhat challenging to figure out what to do with the volume of information and direction that was contained in that document. And also it lacked transparency or any sort of measures or KPIs around achievement, whether things were happening or not happening. As well as that, the environment, the whole grain sector environment had changed quite significantly since 2020. So they were the factors that I think influenced the GPSA initiating the review, but certainly through the consultation process, it became very clear that the 2020 blueprint was somewhat unwieldy and challenging to understand exactly where it was headed in a directional sense. And there was a real desire to see a much simpler and concise blueprint with some indicators, performance indicators in there that could be tracked over time, so that industry could see whether things were moving ahead, static or going backwards. So that's the net result of where we've got to with the 2025 blueprint, and the dashboard as being the vehicle that people can access to determine how the performance indicators are tracking.
Yep. And I guess to add to that, as mentioned previously, that from a GPSA perspective, we see this as being our guiding principles that guides our board, but also if we're talking with exporters and value-adding partners and researchers, it basically becomes the guiding principles, the way forward, the areas of priority that we want to partner with them on to take the industry forward.
Yeah,
and we're all aligned on that.
I think that's a really important point, John, that the blueprint, as opposed to GPSA's strategic plan, the blueprint is a sector-wide public-facing document. And that's really important for everybody who's a participant across the value chain in the sector.
Yep, fantastic. So this question goes to how success is measured. So across the different pillars, how is GPSA going to measure success, and through the updated dashboard, and will that be available online for everyone to see? And how often do we expect that to be updated? Is that something that will be updated once every quarter, once every year, or once every couple of years?
Okay. Would you like me to handle that one?
Yeah, I'll let you take that one, Neil.
Okay. So for each of the indicators, for each of the pillars, we've got a set of what we call directional indicators. I'm not sure that that's the terminology that we'll land on it finally, but they're a set of indicators that can be used to determine or track how each of the pillars is progressing. So that will be available on the dashboard, but importantly, they will need to be reviewed and updated. So GPSA is establishing a policy committee. I'm not sure when that's going to be launched, but fairly soon. Is that right, Ron?
Yep.
And part of the role of the policy committee will be to review each of those performance indicators on a periodic basis and assess whether the indicator is moving forward, is on track, or whether it's static, so nothing's happening, or whether it's falling behind because there's not anything that's occurred in relation to addressing that particular indicator. And that will be reported on, so it'll be quite publicly available 24/7 on the GPSA website through the dashboard. So it's very transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the difference compared to Blueprint 1.0 is that very fact is that it was very difficult to actually measure success. It was very difficult to there was a whole heap of things that came out of the initial blueprint, which are really significant and were really important. But it was not easy to actually track, what was working, but also where the gaps were and the things that actually, where we weren't actually meeting the objectives. And I think the good thing about having the dashboard, I think, is that well, two things. It makes it very easy to see where those gaps are, but we actually have a mechanism now where we're actually, from the GPSA executive, from the policy committee, who will actually be looking to identify where those gaps are and where we actually need to be working with growers, working with industry, working with researchers to fill those gaps.
Yeah.
Great. This question goes to the pillars. So how does the enabling principle, the leadership, advocacy, and collaboration, how does that interact with each of the pillars, and how is that envisaged?
So the principles really guide GPSA in terms of the overall management of each of the three pillars. So it's a set of guidelines, essentially, that GPSA, the board and the executive team, can use to guide how they approach each of the three pillars. So it's really just that set of guidelines for GPSA to ensure that it's able to deliver on the pillars.
Yep, excellent. So I've only got a handful of questions left, so we might be able to wrap up a little bit early. So was national agriculture strategies taken into account as part of the review, and how that links up with South Australia?
Yep. So as I mentioned, the interviews that I undertook were Australia-wide, pretty much, and certainly to inform the approach that we undertook right from the outset, we undertook a literature review and examined national policy documents, and that informed the interviews that we undertook. And from the players that I spoke to, who were involved in, and some of those were not just national but international players, that informed really the themes that emerged out of the consultation process, which in turn informed the pillars that we've landed on, the three pillars that we've landed on for the blueprint document. So it was a much wider focus than just South Australia, obviously for the benefit of South Australia, but a much wider focus than just looking locally for the development of the blueprint or the revised blueprint.
And so this is probably the last question, but what sort of collaboration does the blueprint sort of expect between GPSA, government bodies, industry bodies, and other stakeholders to actually see the blueprint to fruition?
Yep. So that really goes back to the vision to 2035, which is heavily based or heavily focused on that collaborative approach. There's no way known with the resources that GPSA has that it will be able to deliver on that vision by itself. Just impossible. So for this to succeed, it has to be a partnership model, and that partnership model is not only, I think, or doesn't only involve people who are involved directly in the supply chain or value chain, but that's really important. But I think it needs to extend out to other sectors that interface, because the grain industry is involved with a whole series of other players, and that might be supplying feedlots as an example. So I think it's really important that there's an holistic approach taken in relation to this collaborative model, and fostering and developing those partnerships is really, really important. And certainly from the feedback that I had during the consultation process, there's a very, very strong willingness, whether it's from organisations like SPA on precision agriculture to the Cargills of the world and others to be involved, because everybody along the value chain benefits from this collaborative approach. It certainly benefits the farmers, the growers that you represent, that GPSA represents, but everybody benefits through a stronger collaborative approach, and the willingness is there to make it work. And I think South Australia, as I said before, this is a really strong competitive advantage. We don't have the scale, say, that Western Australia has. We don't necessarily have the capital for a whole range of things, but we do have this ability to be quite nimble because of our size, and a really strong track record in terms of collaboration that we can build on going forward. So it's a really, really important part of it.
And I guess I just add to that obviously the state government has invested in this blueprint review and as well, and so for them, obviously they're keen to see where our future direction is and what our vision is, and it certainly becomes something that we know becomes a talking point with them, or something that we can work with them right across the whole board, because our blueprint for success also obviously builds into the South Australian economy. So it's like we're all on the same page, but actually being focused in our approach as a total whole of industry.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that brings me to the end of the questions that have come through. John or Neil, did you want to say anything else, closing comments, thoughts before I wrap up and we end the webinar?
John, I think that's your job.
Thanks, Neil. No, look, I said once again, thanks to those who have joined today, and also to those who are listening to the recording over time, and because we know that there's a bit of information in here. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to Neil for the work that you've done to date. We've still got quite a bit of work to do as we take the next steps now to make this live and to launch it over time, and I guess to put a bit of meat on the bones as well. So it is an exciting time for us, but from a GPSA perspective, I think the whole industry, it's really pleasing that we have something that we can that we can use that's quite tangible, that to help build on our vision going forward.
Right. Thanks very much, John, and thanks very much, Neil. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
and thanks everyone for attending this webinar. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and we'll be putting this up on GPSA's YouTube channel later today, where you can watch it back at your leisure. GPSA is looking for any feedback, submissions on the state of the blueprint and what we've presented in this webinar. And if you do have any feedback, feel free to send them through via that email or give us a call, or send us a message on social media, etc. Any format, we don't mind at all. We will also upload this video to GPSA's website, and that'll house all the information regarding the blueprint as well. So you can find all the information there. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll collate that information and include that into the updated blueprint, and then we'll provide an update to grant producers on the rollout of the finalised blueprint and the launch. So thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.